So, welcome back to Silmarillion Total War and to another battle replay and to another of the historically inspired battles made by Lord of Balagost. And once again, this is going to be a battle fought between the Persians and the Greeks, the Battle of Mycale or Mycale, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. Regardless, if you are interested in what actually happened in the battle itself, then feel free to look it up, because I do believe, to reiterate once again, someone else is going to be doing these battles with a little bit more of a focus on the actual historical side of things, whereas I'm going to be looking at them much more with a lens, much more through the lens of Silmarillion, and making it more of a theme around the Lord of the Rings aspect of things. Because I don't want to tread on any toes, I don't want to do exactly the same thing that someone else is doing, even if it is the same battle. And rather interesting one here, because we have once again the Easterlings taking up the role of the Persians this time around, and they do have a little encampment on the top of this hill, and the Confederation of Greeks, once again I would assume helmed by the elves, is going to be across the other way. Now one problem is, once again, this is a map where someone has gone a little bit too crazy with the tree brushes, so it does have this pop-in. I would have thought this is something, honestly, that people would have learned not to do at this point, because this is a real problem when you put too many trees on the map. But hopefully it won't be too distracting through the battle itself. But we shall have a look through. I'm not entirely sure who's on the attack and who's on the defence today. I believe, however, this might be the first of the battles where the elves are the ones that have to take the front foot. We shall see, but regardless of that, we will go through the Easterling armies first of all, because that was where Lord of Balagost was, and he was the one who sent me all of these, so it's going to be seen from his perspective once again. Playing as the frontal Easterling army, he's got some Clan Guard of Falathrim here on the front, nice unit of solid line infantry. They do find themselves outpaced by the elves at the high end, but against basic units of Elven line infantry, they can actually outperform them because of their tankiness, their armour values, and so on and so forth. But if you come up against stuff like Footmen of Amras from the House of Feanor, or some of the better units like the Aran Kielim, then you will obviously find yourself outgunned. But the Easterlings, while they do have this solid Lothlin line, it's solid enough to withstand quite a lot of punishment, but you often have to win battles through other means, and we shall see what they have. We have once again the Despoilers of Dor-Caranthir, who've been a very big part of the Easterling armies in all of Balagost's scenarios so far, and there's a good reason for that. One is they won't overly saturate the Easterling army with a bunch of AP power that the Sons of Ulfang would provide, but they are decent enough to actually do damage for the time that they are alive. Falxmen do tend to be a bit glass cannony, excuse me, and they do tend to... The charge bonus is nice, but it's hard to get it off efficiently often, but even so, they do offer a nice amount of damage where the Lothlin units do not, and they won't skew the scenario too much in one direction, which if you have too many of the Sons of Ulfang, that can be the case. Speaking of which, we've got the Sons of Ulfang over here, which is the General's Bodyguard unit. Once again, I do reiterate the fact that I do question whether or not they can actually be classified as a General's Bodyguard unit when you consider them alongside the other multiple HP, really powerful Bodyguard units. We saw how devastating the Arqueni Mormagilwa were in the last battle replay that we saw from Eclipse's scenario. I do not believe the Sons of Ulfang could ever hope to match that kind of performance, because of the fact that they don't have that second hit point. There are more of them, and that does make a big difference, but if you're using a bodyguard unit correctly, you shouldn't have them isolated anyway, so it becomes less of a problem. But still, the Sons of Ulfang are here, and in the last battle that we saw from Balagost, to be fair, they did perform quite well. So we shall see if they can do the same again. But I look at them as more of a very high-tier infantry unit, more so than a dedicated bodyguard. Ravagers of Heimring, or Himring, I should say. The basic entry-level Falxmen, so very fragile really, capable of doing a lot of damage for their cost, but still very easy to deal with if you can target them down with arrows. We've got the Warband of Lothlin on the front, who are a very basic unit, but still, good shield value, decent for what they are, low cost and decent performance. They'll do better than the equivalent sort of Wretches of Angband or the Hishtbuk Raz over in Tollingalhoth. So, you could say that they are a very useful unit indeed for the Easterlings to help hold on to the front. Damage-wise, of course, so they do leave a little bit to be desired, but that's to be expected from an entry-level spearman. Halberdiers of Lothlin, one of the most important tools you can have as the Easterlings. Pound for pound, I'd say they're the most efficient units the Easterlings can field, because they can do damage with their AP phalanx, and they're also very good for holding the line over longer periods of time. And of course they have the armour that the Lothlin units are known for. Eastron Hunters, something you won't be seeing really in the standard Easterling armies. They're just here for the scenarios to give them a foot archer. Very basic foot archer, of course, so they will still be outclassed by the elves quite easily, but it is a luxury the Easterlings often do not have at their disposal. We've also got some Easterling Marauders over here, so the throwing axes, capable of doing a decent amount of damage to the right targets at close range, but of course don't expect miracles from them, they're very much an entry-level unit. And back over here we have genuinely the bodyguard unit, the infantry bodyguard unit that the Eastlings have, the Chieftain's Honour Guard. They are very tanky, they do have the armour values that you would expect from like the Lothlin clan, and big shield value as well. Performs quite well, to be fair. Very much a focus around survivability, unlike the Sons of Ulfang, very polar opposites that they are, and it'll be interesting to see how they perform here. Meanwhile, over on the coastal side of things, we have Mevin playing as another Easterling army, of course, Easterling Hunters, we've got some Warband of Lothlin as well. Be interesting to see if he's got any more units. I do believe he has got some, yeah, he's got some Wardens of Lothlin in there, so the spear version of the more heavily armoured Easterling units. Nice to have around, because they're very good at holding the line, to be fair. Spears are better at holding a line. Well, they're better at taking punishment while holding a line than swordsmen are, but of course they can't give as much damage back as swordsmen, which is generally why the swordsmen alongside the halberdiers are the way you want to go, because then you have pretty much everything you need. But the spears here will be useful, and also they have that anti-cavalry utility as well. Other than that, there's some Sons of Ulfang interspersed throughout the lines as well. Just in behind here we can see there are some Variag mercenaries as well. They're actually a genuinely decent archer unit, can take a decent amount of punishment, but I question whether or not they're going to be able to withstand the withering fire the elves can put down. Marauders of Himring, we saw them in the last battle as well. Unlike the Easterling Marauders, they can actually perform decently in melee, and they do wear some kind of armour with a shield as well, so just all around they're a better version really, but they are more of a hybrid unit, so they are intended to be that, you know, they throw their axes in and then they get stuck in melee, more so than the Easterons, which have a little bit more in terms of ammunition. Despoilers of Dorcaranthia and Ravagers of Heimring at the back, so more Falksmen. And then finally, occupying the encampment at the top of the hill, some of these tents are floating in midair, we have Tundra's Fox, who does have some upgraded Easterling crossbowmen, so it'll be very interesting to see how they perform against an Elven advance, because of course the stopping power of crossbows can be so effective. Warband of Lothlin, we have some halberdiers in there as well, much the same thing. Clan Guard, got the Sons of Ulfang and some Wardens, Marauders of Himring. He also has some Salamandrine Guards, so they do have some fast movers, flaming arrows to reduce the morale of the opponents that they hit, and of course anti-cavalry capabilities, which when you're facing off against the elves is very nice. I do think that they are a little bit lackluster against monsters, to be brutally honest, based on what I've seen and experienced. But against standard cavalry, like I've said, they are very effective, very useful, and quite difficult to deal with for opponents of the Easterlings. And of course the elves tend to be all about that cavalry, or at least some of them do. Ravagers and Marauders, and then some more Clan Guard over here as well. So, speaking of the elves, let's go and have a look and see what they are offering today. Waffle's playing as the House of Finarfin. He's got some Defenders of Talath Dianin on the front, very much your sort of rank and file as Finarfin, useful for potentially zoning out that cavalry, but also they will outperform the basic units of Eastlings. But the Lothlin units, actually, I think, especially the swordsmen, will outmuscle the Defenders of Talath Dianin. Just in behind we've got some swordsmen. They throw that javelin first, so they've got a little bit of utility, very Roman in their style of warfare, throwing that javelin and then getting into melee. Basic, but very useful. And in behind we have the half-strength unit, which rather confusingly does have armour piercing, so there is a little bit of a sort of trade-off between the two. But they're a smaller unit anyway, so but it is worth bearing in mind that could come into play. Bridge Wards of Nargothrond, something that the Eastlings will have to be really careful of. They're going to have to use stuff like axe throwers and horse archers on them. A type of unit which in general the Eastlings are going to struggle with because of their general lack of foot archers under normal circumstances, but with crossbows and archers that they've been given this time, maybe not quite so much of a problem. If they do get into a melee with the Bridge Wards, it's going to be quite grisly for them. And the Wardens of Nargothrond, of course, add that armour piercing and the ability to hold the line with those shields as well, which makes them such a competent duo together. Sartor Finderato, a really, really tanky unit of bodyguard spears, fighting alongside the Arqueni and Morma Gilwa. We saw how devastating they can be in the last Silmarillion replay. And another unit of Wardens, which are the detachment, the half-strength version. Then in the middle, we skipped over them very briefly before, we have Agalar Gudmudithon, who has got a Falathrim army. He's got some Nobles of Balar on the front, so another really devastating phalanx unit. All of this together means that the Halberdiers might not be the crutch that the Eastlings can normally rely upon, because with the Nobles of Balar and especially the Bridge Wards on station, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to really set up nice front lines that they can be sure will hold for a long time. But still, Nobles of Balar here, very, very strong. Rangers of Brythombar, which their armour is not fantastic, but as elves they're going to have decent damage, decent range, so I don't know how good the Easterling hunters will be at counter-skirmishing them, we shall see. The Marines of Brythombar are very similar to the swordsmen of Talath-Dyrnin, albeit a little bit more lightweight. Just in time we also have the Arain Ephedun, the one multiple HP unit that the Falathrim have, very tanky. I don't know actually which is the tankier between them and the Sartor Finderato, but I would think it's the Arain, just because of their bigger shields. It could be very close though. To be fair, they'll perform in much the same fashion for the most part. Seafarers of Brythombar with those armour-piercing maces will be very useful against the Lothlan clan units. Also have some scouts of Eglarest, which could be used to try and chase down and zone out the Salamandrine Guard, but difficult opponent for the scouts are the Salamanders. Marines of Eglarest, they've got better javelins and they are also spears in melee. So very much the kind of a Linden vibe going on here with their javelin units, which can double as something else in melee, which the Falathrim do need to utilise. Very much a combined arms type of faction are the Falathrim. More Marines over here, and that's pretty much it. And I think the final army is another Falathrim one as we flew overhead, and indeed it is. Crimson Alucard, he's got some Arain Ephedun as well. He's also got the mighty Aran Kia Lim, which are a really fantastic unit of heavily armoured swordsmen. I think they actually outperform the Footmen of Amras 1-to-1, but I think the Footmen of Amras, with how much they cost, even with the upgrades, are probably more efficient than the Aran Kia Lim. But of course, the Falathrim do need this armoured unit right in the middle of their roster, so it'll be an interesting one. It's an interesting question to ask. The Mariners of Erendil, who have got those bonuses to morale and damaging different types of units, we'll see how useful they prove to be, quite a few of them. Spear host of Brythombar on the flank, backed up by Marines of Brythombar, Rangers of Brythombar, Marines of Eglarest, and that is pretty much it. So without further ado, let's begin. It's going to be an interesting one as well. There's some interesting terrain as this valley that runs through the middle, so this sort of, it's almost like a river that's at low tide really, with these ponds that lead out to the sea. But it will be interesting to see how the Easterlings react to the elves, because generally of course the Easterlings have to be a little bit more on the front foot, because generally speaking they're without ranged units of their own. Not the case this time around though. Belagos is going to be sort of holding the lower reaches of the valley, and the elves are going to start to move forwards. You can also see as well that some of these units are starting to empty out of the encampment. And the Salamanders could be a very, very important part of the defence here today, because if they can deal with those scouts of Eglarest, they can start firing and they can start harassing the elves as they advance. To be fair though, the Falathrim and Finarfin are probably the two elven factions that have got the most plentiful spears. So in terms of charging into the infantry as they move forward, it's going to be easier said than done. And even units like the Mariners of Erendil that we can see Aguilar has got a unit of as well. I think they have a slight bonus to cavalry. It might be just against elephants. If that's the case, then it's less of a problem. But even so, with all the javelins, with all the spears, pole arms as well, they've got their own cavalry which can be used, the scouts. The Salamanders could be very useful, but it's going to be difficult to get the most out of them given the compositions of the Falathrim, and especially Finarfin are dealing with. I mean, Finarfin are very much made up of spears, pikes, all of that good stuff. There's not many targets you would want to go after, and even the units without spears tend to have javelins. So it's going to be tough for them. But of course the Eastlings do have the advantage of being able to hold certain points. How good they're going to be at doing that when the pole arms clash with one another, we shall have to wait and see. I don't know if there's any stakes. There's some surrounding the camp, of course, but they're a fortification feature and not actual stakes on the battle map that you can run through and get your cavalry killed. So I don't believe. To be fair though, I don't think Finarfin had much in the way of archers. They may have had a couple hidden. They do have the Stalkers, which are an archer unit. No, they're not actually, are they? The Scouts are the archer unit. Stalkers are the assassin unit. So if they don't have much in the way of archers, the Salamanders could actually skirmish them down from long range. And that may be the best way to go, because the Falathrim do have archers. They've got some Rangers of Brythombar which can be utilised. The Salamanders are firing. Marines of Eglarest, they're shaken, but that's a greatly exaggerated feature of the Salamanders. They do drop the morale into shaken, but you won't see them rout off in the face of that. Even if the morale debuff applied is the lowest one possible, it will still register as the unit being shaken, but they're not in any danger of running away. which is worth bearing in mind. Meanwhile, Mevin has moved forward and he's going to be holding the part of the coastline which is closest to the sea, as Crimson Alucard starts to crest the hill as well. Shape of the engagement is important here, because whoever gets a nice downhill engagement is going to tire out the other side quickly. Easterling hunters are going to begin to fire in here. And the Brythonbar units, even with their shields from the front, not the best under arrow fire, I have to say. Marines of Brythonbar taking a bit of damage as well. That is a notable frame drop there. Not many losses, but still, that's all the Eastlings need to do. Just make it clear that the Brythonbars are not going to be able to just sort of sit here and spend all day getting into a nice, neat shape. Easterling crossbowmen getting into position now as well, and they are in range, which is going to be bad news for Aguilar, because the Easterling crossbows are by far, really, the most dangerous skirmisher that the Eastlings have. But immediately, of course, that is going to draw the ire of the Elven archers, and I think actually that was a blank shot, wasn't it? Yeah, Tundra's Fox. He didn't even let his Easterling crossbow unit get the shot off there before losing his bottle and retreating, which I can understand, to be fair. You really don't want to be losing those crossbowmen cheaply. Easterling hunters continuing to fire across as Crimson Alucard gets his army into position. He doesn't have all day to be waiting over here, though, to be honest with you. I can hear the whistling of javelins, but again, I think that's more blank shots, to be honest with you. And these Easterling hunters so far getting a good amount of kills on the lighter troops that the Falathrim have to offer. And this is good from Crimson Alucard. I think he recognises the situation he's in. He needs to move forward, he needs to engage. He can't afford to just sort of sit here and allow his light troops to get shot. Rangers of Brythonbar can also return fire. And here in the middle you can see the Clan Guard of Lothlan moving forward. Clan Guard of Lothlan already getting into melee, interestingly enough, stopping the Marines of Brythonbar from firing their javelins off efficiently. Lots of projectiles coming in here under the tree cover. Clan Guard a little bit outnumbered, but like I said, the Brythonbar units will not be able to outright defeat the Clan Guard. Without a little bit of support, I would say. They're going to be reliant on numbers here, the Elves, which is ironic. The Eglarest units would probably have a better time of things. The Falksmen getting into position as well, as the Finarfin army continues to go very, very wide. Potentially going to try and take the encampment and then sandwich the Eastlings between the two. I don't know if the Falathrim have got that long, though. We shall have to wait and see. In fact, let's go down to half speed to try and counteract the slowing frame rate when we're at full speed. You can see here the Clan Guard doing really quite nicely in melee against the armor-piercing Seafarers as well. This is the problem with the Seafarers. Their light armor does mean that they're easier prey for swordsmen to deal with, and if they're not supported, the Macemen, they're a little bit too lightweight to achieve what you might expect them to be able to on their own. You need to give them support, and that's really the story of the Falathrim in a nutshell. You need to have your army organised and supported using that combined arms that I mentioned. Otherwise, you can find yourself getting out-muscled in a few situations. Now, I will say, stuff like the Ravagers of Heimring, or Himring, I should say, will do decently against the Brythonbar units, but they have much the same problem where they're very, very fragile, and of course the Elves should, you would think, be able to take full advantage of that. Crimson Alucard, I think he was going to send over support to try and go this way, but I think he recognises the fact that if he doesn't have his full army facing off against Mevin's front line, he's going to start to get pushed back here. And you can see here immediately a lot of these Brythonbar units taking a lot of damage from the basic Easterling skirmishers. So far, so good, I would say, for the Easterling hosts. Warband of Lothlan charging in, spears down, getting into the Marines of Brythonbar. I think the Marines should be okay in melee here, pulling out those swords. They are designed, after all, to be able to be a melee combatant as well. And they are going up against the entry-level spear of the Eastlings. The issue may come in the fact that the Eastlings have got better support in place than the Falathrim here, and as soon as stuff like the Despoilers start to move forward, that's going to be bad news for any unit that bears the name of Brythonbar. And Halberdiers of Lothlan are also getting in here as well, and without any other polearms on the front line, once again, it's going to be pretty tough here for the Falathrim to get what they want from this engagement. Meanwhile, as we move forward, you can see, I think, yeah, the Eastlings are starting to move forward. Crimson Alucard is going to have to leave some of these units behind to guard his flank, and in come some Despoilers. They will get a charge off here as well. Like I said, the Falksmen have got a really nice charge on them. Infantry landing charges does tend to be a little bit of a problem, but they have managed here to get a decent amount of damage off on the Marines of Eglarest right away. Now, the Eglarest units are sort of a more medium unit than the lighter Brythonbar, so they will be able to withstand the higher base damage of these Falksmen a little better. But I would still back the Despoilers in this particular fight, especially with the numbers advantage, which has only grown following that charge. In come some Marines of Brythonbar to try and put some pressure on the flank of these Easterling Falksmen. But moving forward here, Balagost on the attack. Easterling Marauders throwing some axes in to try and support the front line. It's under tree cover like this, it can be very difficult to keep your lines in shape. With the Orion Effadoon on the front line as well, the quality is starting to get away a little bit from the Easterlings, and with a bit of javelin support in behind the lines as well. Marines of Aglarest there. Both Crimson Alucard and Agalar doing a decent job there. Meanwhile, over on this crossing, you can see Tundra's Fox marching forward with some of his warband of Lothlin. Marching through the trees. There's a little bit of well, this is actually not a little bit, a lot of dead salamanders, which is a bit of a tragedy for the Easterlings. Salamandrian Guard going around the flank. You can see there that Finarfin, I think it's part of the rules really, that they go around and have to conquer the encampment before they do anything else, but the Salamanders are going to have a free run at the side of the Falathrim armies. Will that be good for them, or will it not? We shall have to wait and see. Marauders of Himring. Easteron Hunters back here. A lot of archers, well organised, firing across the river, and if they do go after Brythonbar units, they will be able to fill their boots in terms of kills. Well, they're going after the unshielded Nobles of Balar. Well armoured are the Nobles of Balar. You can see that without a shield, a few of them do fall under every volley from those hunters. You can see over here, just trying to keep this front line going, because Agalar has moved forward now with some Nobles of Balar. So Lord of Balagos is just going to throw some Easterling Marauders in to try and keep this front line going. But also, Chieftain's Honour Guard on the front line, so the Eastlings are not throwing just their garbage in the way. They are sending forward some decent units to try and help hold on. But you can see over here as well, Scouts of Aglarest charging into the side of all of these Falksmen, Ravagers of Heimring, and the Despoilers of Dorcaranthia shaken under the charge of this sword cavalry. You don't want to be lingering too long in melee against the Falksmen though, because I do believe they have an anti-cavalry bonus. They're not anti-armour, but that's not really the most important thing when you're dealing with the Falathrim cavalry. They are, you know, sort of more medium units, like I said, anything that has Aglarest in the name. And those Falxes will start to do a decent amount of damage to these riders if you stay in melee with them for too long. And you can see that the defeat seems certain. Monica has left, and it is now just the victory now even. So they do need to get their scouts out of there a little bit, especially if more Easterling reinforcements are on the way. You can see here some axe throwers doing their thing. Axe throwers will be pretty decent as well. The Easterlings have got a lot of good answers against the more lightweight troops of the Falathrim. Fewer against the Noldor elements of the Falathrim, which also happen to be the most elite part of the Falathrim roster, but we shall see. Meanwhile, over here, continuing to push forward Crimson Alucard. You can see there as well Marauders throwing their axes into the centre of this line. The Aran Kielim, the Mariners, the Orion Effadoon. All of a sudden he's really pushing quite hard onto this front line, and it's become a real contest. Despoilers of Dorcaranthia trying to back up the Clan Guard and Halberdiers of Lothlin. Throwing axes, arrows still being traded back and forth across the river, and you can see that the Rangers of Brythonbar haven't fared too well. They're a smaller unit, relatively lightly armoured, and presumably the Rangers have been trying to fire at other targets as well, more dangerous targets, but that does of course mean that they are losing effectiveness all the time, whereas the Easterling archers are not. I would assume that's Crimson Alucard's army. Mevon's Easterling forces held firm in the face of this advance. Marines going in again, though the Despoilers will be very, very good at dealing with the Brythonbar units, and especially with the backup of the slightly more bulky Lothlin line infantry, swordsmen and spearmen. While again under the tree cover over here, again with more Eastlings arriving on the front line, perhaps as you would expect given Finarfin's current task to take the encampment. The Falathrim are starting to struggle under the weight of a full Easterling advance, the numbers proving to be a bit of a problem. Halberdiers getting onto the front line to back up the warband. Nice and organised here, not leaving any gaps for the Falathrim to try and exploit. And with the numbers of the warband as well, this may be where the lower armour values of some of the Falathrim units start to become their undoing. The Mariners, however, once they get onto the front line, should do decently, but they are on the wrong end of a phalanx, and there are Chieftain's Honour Guard in there as well. Tough times for the Falathrim. They were doing okay here in this central engagement, to be fair. And the scouts of Eglarest do push forward, maybe a little bit too undermanned here in the middle, Lord of Balagost. He's got some units in reserve. Perhaps he was hoping to keep some in reserve for the inevitable fight against Finarfin, but that may prove to be a bit of a problem, with the Falathrim seeing an opportunity here to do some damage in areas of the battlefield and taking it. In come the scouts of Eglarest, going into the clan guard there. Down here there's more clan guard of Lothlin. Both sides looking a little bit thin on the ground, but the Easterlings even more so. And there you can see some javelins being thrown, nobles of Balar as well. No sign of the salamanders at this point in time, but they could be in the backfield over here trying to harass the Falathrim. To be fair though, the Eastlings over here have also managed to get in behind the line, so it's a little bit messy. What have we over here? Yes, we do have the salamanders. Getting away from the scouts of Eglarest, some flaming arrows being loosed as Crimson Alucard tries to push up into Balagost's reserves. He will only get so far before he is ultimately thwarted. Salamanders firing back at the scouts of Eglarest. Several volleys of flaming arrows going forth. Between the two of them, they should probably be able to deal with the scouts fairly simply in melee at this point, especially with Wardens of Lothlin. The scouts are going to go for a charge on the Ravagers, who do turn around. And of course, again, as Falksmen, yeah, now the Spearmen, the Salamanders. I would be shocked if that wasn't the end of the scouts of Eglarest, to be honest with you. They get away pretty quickly, though. That's the benefit of having more lightly armoured but faster moving Elven cavalry. You're very, very slippery, hard to pin down. Nobles of Balar moving forward, so still some Easterling resistance being put up here in the middle. The Lothlin units and the Chieftain's Honour Guard proving their worth. They got so far here, they got far enough here, the Falathrim, but they delved a little bit too greedily and deeply. And now some of the reserves that Balagost had, the Warband of Lothlin, going to be able to deal with these scattered remnants of the elves. And I don't think things are going to go too well for Crimson Alucard over here either. This is probably going to be the most significant Easterling victory on the field, because Mevon's army has been well on top this whole time. Only a portion of Crimson Alucard's army was used over here, and most of it was Brithombar units. And it really does show. I mean, they did commit Aran Kirlim and Arain Afadun later, but it was far too late. There goes one of the generals at the hands of, presumably, the Sons of Ulfang. But yes, a very strong Easterling victory over on the coast. Crimson Alucard's army wiped away, Rangers of Brithombar routing. There's not a lot of resistance left in this middle section either. A few, still some Eglarests. Not going to be enough to stop a whole army, but they're going to need to find a way here. Still a decent amount of Falathrim resistance here in the middle. Nobles of Balar pushing forward, sandwiched the Clan Guard of Lothlin between themselves and the depleted unit of Marines of Brithombar, but I would really be quite surprised if they keep up this fight for much longer. Marauders of Imri throwing their javelins at, yeah, Nobles of Balar definitely the right choice. Might not be AP axe throwers, but good damage against an unshielded unit. Wardens of Lothlin outnumbering the Arain Efadun. There's also these Marauders that they can also commit right now, actually, because they've managed to clean up all resistance in the backfield, really. There might be a couple of Falathrim units back left over here, well, Marines, but they're broken and fighting to the death. So yeah, the Easterlings have won. The Falathrim lie mostly in ruins, so it is going to be this army here from Waffles. What will he do? How will he approach this? Well, he's going to go into the corner. That's questionable. I would have thought that his directive was that he had to assault the camp from behind, but the Easterlings are here waiting, some Easteron hunters lurking. Not a lot of these units are that elite though. And taking the encampment I think is quite important, because you need the huge terrain advantage that this provides if you're going to stand a chance against the Easterlings now. That is where Finarfin are most at home, as we saw in the last battle. They can punch well above their weight if they're given a desirable position in which to dig in. If, however, they have to fight the Easterlings on even footing, the numbers of the Easterlings will be too much, even for the mighty Nargothrond units and the Arqueni. Not much left now. Nobles of Balar fighting till the bitter end, but it will be a bitter end, unfortunately, for them. Moving careful with the crossbows. It'll be interesting to see how much ammunition they still have left. There's still some elves fighting by some of these ponds. A lot of marauders using their one-handed falxes against these elven javelin spear hybrids. It's not looking good for them at this point. And let's see. There's still some Marines of Aglarest up here, and they do still have a bit of javelin ammunition as well by the looks of things. Not enough to make it, obviously not enough for the Falathrim to win, but they need to do as much damage as they still can, the Falathrim, because that will give Finarfin the best chance that they have to try and defeat the Easterling menace. And there go the Marines of Aglarest, routing. Throwing a few javelin volleys in. Sons of Ulfang being pulled back, not a lot of losses taken on them, which is a bad sign for Finarfin, because they're one of the most useful Easterling units for dealing with their armoured Nargothrond units. And these javelins trying to get as much value as they can before the inevitable occurs. Javelins being flung into the marauders. It's only a matter of time, surely. In come the salamanders. Going to go after the routing units with their shotels. Ah, I see. So he had to move into the corner and then he was permitted to move. Interesting. But he's going to attack the encampment now, and he will arrive, I think, shortly before all of the reinforcements will from the front. Especially given the fact the Eastlings have to march uphill. They're a little bit stretched and scattered. So it's not over yet. Finarfin still have the quality, certainly, to worry the Easterlings. What the Eastlings want to be doing is preventing Finarfin from digging in. If they can do that, then they will win. Orion Ephedin's still alive. Routing now, though, I think. They were over here somewhere. This is where the red star is. Here they are. Only 5 of them remain. A volley of crossbows whistling in. Or crossbow bolts whistling in. Crimson Alucard's army completely gone. And Aguilar's will soon follow, because I think these 4 spearmen are all he has. And there goes another crossbow volley. Surviving for now. Maybe not the best shots that they have. I mean, they have enough units over here to be able to finish off these poor spears. Meanwhile, you can see over here, this, though, is where we're going to be seeing the first. The Stalkers of Tor and Faroth are going to be moving forward first. They'll rip their way through the basic Eastron units. Having said that, it's where the Eastron Marauders will probably also have the most joy against the Finarfin rosters. Eastron Hunters, who presumably were utilised earlier and then ran their ammo supply dry. They're going to get in here and try to hold the line. They're going to try and buy as much time as possible for the Eastlings to get back into the encampment and for them to have the nicely defensible position. I don't know how long Eastron Hunters are really going to last, though. The numbers are plummeting very, very quickly. And this is the best use of the scouts, to be honest with you. In come some throwing axes. They'll do a lot of damage, to be fair, to these Stalkers. And they do fire pretty quickly, but as soon as they get into melee, of course, these shirtless hooligans are going to stand no chance against these professional killers. And over here you can see the main body of the army is going to try and go around and get into a position perhaps on the edge of this hill, but they're running out of time, really. More units are arriving. Some Warband of Lothlin have made it back up here. They'll be a little bit more difficult to dislodge than the units that were up here anyway. And then Belagost's army is going to arrive first. But I mean, if Finarfin press their advantage, they could get into a nice position over here, dig in, and then who knows? Could be setting up for a grandstand finish here. Eastron Hunters' victory seems certain. That is highly questionable. Those Eastron Marauders are getting absolutely stomped into the dirt, as you would expect, by the dagger-wielding Stalkers. And there's not many of them left. Some officers, individual sons of Ulfang. Well, you gotta good on that guy, good on that Eastron Hunter using his hand axe to kill off a Stalker. I'm sure that he won't last too much longer himself. Yeah, he's going to suffer here as he gets shanked by 2 of them. What a hero, though. He's taking a lot of punishment, and there he goes. Some bridge wards in the background, the most important unit that Finarfin can have in this situation. If you're outnumbered and you need to hold a position, pikes are going to be your very best friend. Defenders of Falathrim going spear to spear with the warband. And Finarfin will certainly have the edge in that particular fight. See over here, they have gotten into a decent position as well. It might not be perfect. They probably would have preferred to have this area here so they could really make the terrain work for them. But this is better than nothing, I must say. Tundra's Fox moving up with some warband, lots of warband. They're going to be the first ones in to test Finarfin's mettle. And they will not find Finarfin wanting in this kind of fight. As the spears come down in formation. Some Clan Guard of Lothland moving forward as well. So some of the heavy units, Chieftain's Honour Guard as well, a very significant unit. There are 20 though. There may only be 43 of them, but the Easterlings really have nothing that can match them. The Sons of Ulfang have got armour piercing, which is nice, but the skill and quality of the Arqueni is on a different level entirely. Halberdiers, Variag mercenaries moving in. Mevan's army was of course the most healthy following the battle along the river. And that is going to be an issue. As much as Finarfin may be able to deal with what's left of Tundra and Belagost's armies, when Mevan arrives, I'm not entirely sure whether they're going to have the numbers to withstand. Meanwhile, over here, defenders of Falathrim and some Eastron marauders trying to get into place. Bridgewards of Nargothrond pointing the wrong way, and that's because of some salamanders in the backfield. So with the scouts obviously gone, the cavalry and the manoeuvrability belongs to the Easterlings, as it often will against Finarfin, to be honest with you. Finarfin, and I would assume the Nalgrim, or the Dwarves, when they're added, are going to be two factions that lack cavalry completely. And so bearing that in mind, you kind of expect to have the manoeuvrability against Finarfin also. Now, Swordsmen of Falathrim charging in, yeah, these Eastron Marauders are not going to last very long at all, but good, Lord of Belagos doing the right thing. Getting into awkward shapes, making it so Finarfin can organise too easily. Swordsmen of Falathrim trying to get into position over here to utilise their javelins, which I think they already have actually. They've pulled out their blades, and there are a few dead bodies further back down here, which can only be from javelins from Finarfin's perspective. They don't have any of their archers today, including the devastating marksmen of Nargothrond. Defenders of Falathrim are on the front line. They could probably do with some support from the swordsmen here at this point, because the Eastlings are really pushing quite hard on their front. Axe throwers throwing into the backs of those bridge wards. Still those wardens of Nargothrond as well. I mean, if they can... There's marauders of Himring over there, but they are broken. It's got some Ravagers. The marauders once again. There are some Ravagers over here, and they are going to charge in. And they'll probably bounce right off of wardens of Nargothrond, to be honest with you. They've got a decent charge on them, so they might get a couple of kills in the initial... No, yeah, spears are good at taking charges though. And in the end, even the high charge bonus not enough. That goes... I think there goes Tundra's Fox General. Sator Finderato moving forwards. Son of Lord of Belagost's army is now routing. I think the addition of the cavalry over here has probably made life a little bit more awkward for the Stalkers. And there's also a lot of reinforcements over here as well. Ravagers of Himring. Flaming arrows, yeah, those Stalkers, their days are numbered. And all of a sudden fighting back to back Finarfin, but with a narrow position to try and defend. Archers back here, firing at what, I wonder? Almost certainly the bridge wards. It could be anything really over here, any one of the three targets, even the Sartor, because they're pointing the wrong way. Means their shields aren't coming into place. Eastron crossmen, and yeah, this is the problem at this point. If Finarfin, if it were coming down to just pure melee might, Finarfin might have a chance, but with the Eastlings still having missiles of all types really available to whittle Finarfin down, I would say their time is limited. Wardens of Lothland, again the Lothland units proving their worth here against the Falathrim and the rank and file of House Finarfin, finding it perhaps a more difficult task than they were expecting to face off against the Eastlings. Over here though, very even fight. Sons of Ulfang and Halberdiers, however, means that surely this is going to start to struggle a bit at some stage. The Arqueni are over here though, going toe to toe with the Sons of Ulfang. Mevan pulling some of his units back, perhaps trying to reorganise his forces. There's not a huge amount of... Well, actually, there are some units here which are... I don't know how these swordsmen of Falathrim have gotten this far into enemy lines, but they have. Making life a little bit chaotic and disorganised, perhaps, for the Easterlings. now they're going to go backwards again. I mean, they're shaken, so they need to make up their mind of what they're going to do here relatively quickly, otherwise they're just going to end up routing for no real reason. Defenders of Falathrim, and they'll kill off Easterling hunters in droves, of course, but not entirely certain how useful that will actually be. Wards of Nargothrond, bridge wards are over here. The time will come, of course, where the Eastlings have to engage in melee with all of these nasty units like the Sartor and the bridge wards, and you can see here on the back end against Tundra's Fox it's gone very poorly. The Himring units not doing very well against the Nargothrond. Sons of Ulfang, however, are doing substantially better. You can see that they have inflicted damage, but still the Wardens hold. The Sons of Ulfang, their only support are skirmishers that are out of ammunition, but it's better than nothing. I mean, that's the sort of battle that you'd expect the Sons of Ulfang to have to win, to be honest with you. Again, if they are meant to be a bodyguard tier unit, 67 of them should be able to beat a unit of Wardens of Nargothrond straight up, I think. Especially with support. If they can't, then again, it just... I know I keep mentioning this, but to me, the Sons of Ulfang, if they're intended to be a bodyguard unit, they need to be a little bit better. They're good as a high tier shock infantry unit, but a bodyguard unit they are not, in comparison to many others. And I do put the Mythern and Tolgalen into that particular category as well. Because if you're going to have some foot bodyguards that have got 2 HP, it makes the ones that don't have 2 HP look very lackluster by comparison. I think you have to go all in one way or the other to make it viable, really. Personally, I would never have my general in a bodyguard unit that only had like a single HP. If I was going to do it that way, I would put it in a really low tier unit and just leave him at the back. But if I wanted him to be in a strong unit, it would not be in a unit that had a single HP when there was an option not to. And the Eastlings do in the Chieftain's Bodyguard, so such is the way of things. More Sons of Ulfang over here. I mean, the Eastlings are cleaning things up over on this side. Those defenders of Talath Din, once again, they delve too greedily and too deeply and find themselves completely surrounded. And they will break and fight to the death. Wards of Nargothrond trying to get back into shape. You can see more and more Finarfin are having to engage in backs to the wall tactics. And more it's looking like an Easterling victory is going to be the order of the day. Marauders of Himring charging in. Sons of Ulfang charging in as well, now surrounding elements of the Talath Din based front line. Those facing off against the units from the front, those warband are broken and fighting to the death. Crossbowmen also coming in. Wards of Nargothrond are superb at holding the line, to be fair. But there's only so many Eastlings they're going to be able to face off against and kill here. Bridge wards, Wardens of Nargothrond. Still Ravagers back here as well. You know that things have gone fairly well for you as the Eastlings if you've still got Ravagers alive in the late game because of how fragile they can be. And Mevan's army still looking in decent shape. Tundra and Balagost have taken fairly terminal casualties at this point, but they still have enough, the Easterlings, to be able to overwhelm and overrun the Finarfin armies. Over here, Halberdiers, the Lothlin units, again proving their strength. Ravagers are over here as well. The bridge wards are fighting, but they don't have the best formation. They're a little bit disorganised, which is what you really want to be seeing if you're facing off against Finarfin. If they don't have their pikes organised, that is an opportunity for you to flood forwards and defeat them. And Mevan is on the way, trudging forwards. Those crossbowmen don't have much time left, though. Portions of this front line are made up of substandard troops, and that's not going to be good news. I guess that must have been Mevan before then, because that's Tundra's Fox. Balagost's general is presumably the only one that's left. Interesting, and there you can see Tundra's army routs at the loss of his general, so perhaps not all is not lost here. This is a real feature when the battle looks bleak, but Finarfin have the ability to dig in and defend as the enemies crash against them. They always seem to find a way to make the battle tense for the team that had the advantage over them. I'd be really interested to see when the Nalgrim get added what sort of philosophy goes into their faction design, and ultimately who ends up being the best line holders of them all. between themselves and Finarfin, because I'd imagine they'd be obviously superb at holding line because of how heavy duty the dwarves are known to be. Still some salamanders running around the outer edge of the field, so Tundra's Fox is still here. He's going to try and get into the rear of this portion of Finarfin resistance over here, down in the trenches. Wardens of Nargothrond. Belagost's army is almost completely gone at this point, but Mevin should have enough to overrun Finarfin. I mean, he won't if he just blobs up like this. He needs to go around a little bit more and hit into this area over here, because if he doesn't, he's in trouble. If he elects to make the map this small when going up against Bridge Wards of Nargothrond, when a lot of his army is still made up of relatively fragile units, then he's asking for his own doom. Yeah, and he's doing so now. He's getting around the flank with some Marauders, with some Variags, also with some Ravagers. Just any units, to be fair. Making the battlefield as wide as possible is important. There's still a few units fighting to the death on the front line, but it's close this. Like I said, Finarfin have got a real habit of doing this, making the battle close. And will the Easterlings' more fragile units be the end of them? Ravagers moving in. The Sartor are here. 52 Sartor Findarata. That's going to take some doing to crush them. You're going to need to overload the front line, really. What's going on over there? Routing units. Routing Halberdiers. There's still a lot of Lothlin units here on the front. And again, I do still think in terms of numbers here, Finarfin do have a job to do. With Halberdiers still active. Bridgewards are here though, again doing the business. Sons of Ulfang are still there. Could it be? We saw them not quite able to do it against the Falathrim in the last battle replay. Will this be a different story? Will they be able to do that against the Easterlings, I wonder? Falathrim and the Easterlings have got a few similarities now that I think about it. The split between lighter and heavier units. Falathrim are much more comfortable at range though with their heavy and light archers. The Easterlings have got to be a little bit more cute about how they do things. Ravagers are in here with the Marauders. And again, Wardens of Nargothrond. Talath Dianan units as well. Variag mercenaries, over 100 of them, but looking like routing. Mevin's loss of his general could prove to be absolutely crippling here. And you can see a lot of the less seasoned fighting men here, routing, running from the field in large numbers, and all of a sudden it's looking grim for the Easterlings, I must say. Sons of Ulfang have got that damage dealing potential, and they are facing off against the Sartor. Where did that Arqueni unit go? They were on the front line over here, so most of them must be dead. There might be a couple of them left alive. Indeed there are. 5 Arqueni Mormagilwa. Still a fair amount of heavier Easterling units. Some units returning from routing. 43 Marauders. The Easterlings are going to need more of these men to return from routing and keep up the good fight. And the Sartor are going to try and go through the Easterlings, maybe cause a bit of panic. I don't know, you know, it's looking pretty good at this point for Finarfin. They've got such a strong point of spears over here that I don't think the Eastlings are going to be able to wear down. They've got Falksmen still up. Yeah. Must be Tundra, I would assume. Yeah, I don't think they're going to have what it takes. I think Finarfin are just going to be able to outlast them here. The Falksmen are not going to be able to do the business here against the Spearmen of Finarfin. More units returning from routing, but most of them are lower end units that are going to rout all the easier now that they've already routed once. Not looking good for them at all, is it? And there we go. It looks like this time Finarfin are going to be able to show what they're all about. Their Falathrim allies, of course, did a lot of damage earlier on, but were ultimately defeated. I think now, though. 48 Sons of Ulfang. Big serrated Falxes, but they're not going to be able to be the battle winners for them today. The Wardens of Nargothrond once again proving themselves to be such an effective unit. skewering poor Easterlings left, right and centre. And it's going to be victory for the Elves. It was looking good for the Eastlings for quite a while there, but ultimately they weren't able to defeat the might that is a Finarfin front line. The Lothland units continuing to fight the good fight. Not many, yeah, there's 21 despoilers left. There's a few more Sons of Ulfang, but it ain't going to be enough. And eventually their army will start to rout. The Sons of Ulfang might be locked morale, so they might stand and fight to the bitter end, but you can see here the Lothland line infantry, the despoilers, all of the basic units that are over here getting skewered by the Sartor are going to perish and then run. Few swordsmen of Falathrim left alive. They did their job well as well, fighting on the front line, proving that while they are basic in comparison to the higher tier units, the Falathrim units are perfectly serviceable for holding a line. They're capable of dishing out a good amount of damage against more fragile units like the Himrings and the Easterlings. And that surely is going to be that. Might be an admit defeat actually here from Mevin, because the Sons of Ulfang won't rout, but there are only 300 frames left. Well, there goes the general. So his general was still alive then. Must have been Belagost's that died earlier on. Very strange. And there we go. That's going to be a full rout. Sons of Ulfang. Are they going to stick around and fight? No. They routed. Very close. 2% the difference here. And Finarfin, siege mentality kicked in, and that was enough for them to win. You can see how much damage they did when it came down to that sort of fight, which if the Easterlings don't have the ability to break up those pikes, then it's a problem for them. Their fragile units will simply take too much damage on the end of those bridge wards, and they won't have the power to break through the Finarfin lines. They did very well down on the riverbed, Mevin in particular, but as the battle wore on, it became clear that the Eastlings just didn't have that strength to be able to deal with a faction like Finarfin in this kind of scenario. Let's see what did the damage for the Easterlings though. So Sons of Ulfang getting 162 kills, that's a decent return from them. Clan Guard doing well on the front line as often they do. Despoilers of Dor Caranthia were 257, which I would assume came against stuff like Brithombar units. So it does go to show that they definitely have their place against lighter units. The Falksmen can be very dominant. But of course, you know, Finarfin isn't made up of lighter units, so they did more poorly against them. The Eastron Hunters as well goes to show that in a situation like this, having access to foot archers can really be the difference. And in a siege situation, not having foot archers under normal circumstances makes the Easterlings a very odd faction to play. Their legendary company will be a unit of foot archers, but of course you can only have one of them per army, so it'll be interesting to see how the meta develops with them being on the defence. Halberdier is doing decently, Variag Mercenaries doing okay as well. For this army, Sons of Ulfang with a less impressive performance, but this must have been Tundra because he had the Salamanders, and they did okay. You know, they definitely were a factor in how quickly the Falathrim were turned back in some areas, and they hunted down and destroyed the Falathrim cavalry as well. Several units breaking 100, crossbows, marauders, basic units of Clan Guard, and also a unit, the Chieftain's Honour Guard doing quite well as well. And then finally 219 kills on the Sons of Ulfang and 129 on the Chieftain's Honour Guard, so damage and defence there being shown in the kill counts. Lothland units doing decently as well. Despoilers of Dor Caranthia having one of their better games, I would say, across the board, but that's to be expected when you're facing off against the lighter units from the Falathrim. Ravagers doing decently as well, which is something you certainly don't see every day. Eastron Hunters as well, very efficient for a lighter archer, and that was certainly proved here. So yeah, big thank you to Lord of Belagost for sending this one in. It's the last of the 3 that I've been given, and this means that I can finally get on with updating my Silmarillion build so that if any more come in, I'll actually be able to do them now. I'm not sure exactly when this one will come out. It'll probably come out in early January sometime. I'll probably leave a little bit of a gap between this one and the other 2, even though I've recorded them all on the same day, back to back. I think what I'll be doing is leaving this one a couple more weeks perhaps, or 1 week at least, just so that I'm not oversaturating with Silmarillion and I'm trying to sort of spread the load out a little bit more. Because I do get fewer Silmarillion replays, so I don't want to cluster them all together in that fashion. I want to make sure that there's more of a steady stream of it rather than just dumping it all at once. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the situation the channel will be in by early January. Hopefully things will have started to move in certain directions for me, which probably means a channel update either already would have actually come out or will be imminent following this replay, I would suggest, because I think I'll probably have a much better idea about what's actually going to be happening by then. But regardless, that's by the by, really. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.